Italiani, buongiorno. Oggi vi presentiamo un'intervista in inglese, speriamo di poterla sottotitolare in italiano nei prossimi giorni, di un medico statunitense che finalmente non ci ha fatto sentire così soli nell'universo. Un medico che dice le nostre stesse cose, le nostre stesse verità, o almeno quelle che noi pensiamo siano verità, ma e che pensiamo anche in alcuni casi, come per esempio l'integrazione della vitamina D, addirittura possa salvare vite. Non farla, no farla, attenzione. Quindi noi siamo assolutamente contrari all'integrazione vitamina D, in particolare quella selvaggia dei nostri, che fanno i nostri medici funzionali e propongono guru evolutivi. Per cui un'ora di diretta Facebook, ovviamente disponibile sul nostro canale YouTube. Sigla! Vado?
Vai.
We are live with Leland Stillman. How are you, Leland, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, yes.
We have the huge pleasure and honor to meet you here for our blog. And first, we want to make a brief introduction. So, usually we are very skeptical, especially lately, about medical doctors, because both conventional medical doctors really disappoint us because of the reductionist approach with health. But we already know about that. So our followers already know about it. But lately, also the alleged functional medicine doctor disappointed us as well, because they were supposed to go at the root of disease, but they demonstrated to be the other side of the coin of allopathic doctors. So we are really skeptical, but we are really pleased to find people like Dr. Leland, which is a really open-minded practitioner who came across really interesting variables about health and disease. So he's a real expert about light and mitochondrial health. So if you can give us a brief overview about who you are.
Sorry, I interrupt you because
Okay.
So if you can give us a brief overview about who you are, what you do, and how you came across your perspective.
Sure. So I'm a general practitioner here in the United States, and I became interested in medicine when I was young because I was not particularly healthy myself, and I began to try different things to try and improve my health and improve how I was feeling, how I was performing. And I became so interested in it that I eventually went to medical school and pursued training in general practice. And I stuck with general practice because I really liked just learning about everything. And I like to joke with people that subspecialization is for people who are not ambitious enough to try and know everything. And that's not a problem that I have. And so I then got interested in natural medicine because it's obviously the only way to really get to good health. The drugs and surgeries that people have been really brainwashed into thinking are good for them are really just, stopgaps. That's what we call it in English, which basically just means they're half measures. They're not really, like you said, dealing with the root of the problem. And so I began looking into what things in nature really affected people's health. And then as you mentioned, there are a lot of people out there in the natural health movement, or whatever you want to call it, who are selling people natural things that are not necessarily good for them. Everyone is different. Everyone's got their own individuality, their biochemistry, their anatomy, so on and so forth. And so what's right for one person is not going to be right for another person. That's kind of the next level. If you're looking at it, it's like the first level is just the really, really simple stuff like antibiotics and whatever, which is sort of traditional conventional medicine. And then Next would be, right, nourishing the body, getting people more nutrition, more nutritious food, cleaner food. But then the really next level is figuring out, okay, well, how does this person work specifically? What's going on with them? And I have just been studying pretty much in most of my free time since graduating from my training program here to try and really figure out what actually mattered. And that's how I stumbled into all this mitochondrial health type stuff. I began figuring out that there were limitations to what I could do with diet, because it's not the only thing that you can do. And it's what most people are fixated on, because it's where there's a lot of money to be made. You can make a lot of money selling people supplements. You can still make a lot of money selling people blue blockers or lights or whatever, but the value in these products is so much greater, because I've bought 2 pairs of red blue blockers in the last 2 years, right? That's compared to the average, I think, person buying a lot of supplements, they may buy like $300, $400 worth of supplements in a month. So anyway, that's how I got into all this. I was just really in pursuit of good health for myself, my family, my friends, and obviously my patients. And now I practice here in Richmond, Virginia, and I practice a lot of telemedicine as well. So I work with people all over the country and all over the world.
Are you having positive outcomes from your patients?
Yeah, definitely. And the real benefit, the wonderful thing about natural medicine is that people can get good results with almost any modality. Not all the time, but when you begin to combine them, then all of a sudden people are seeing enormous improvements. I was just recently speaking to a patient who had done all kinds of dietary interventions, but she hadn't changed her breathing mechanics. And people don't realize that things like breathing mechanics affect your blood pH. And if you don't, have the proper balance of gases in your blood, then you are not going to have proper blood flow around the body. And there's things you can do with what you eat and how you eat to address those problems, but it's no substitute for actually fixing the dysfunctional breathing patterns that people have. And that's just, breathing patterns is like one tiny little thing. There's the air that people breathe, or the exercises they do. There's the light they're living under. And then there's so much to know, within that whole world, right? Because now we have all these light bulbs that, for example, will be wireless bulbs, and they're communicating through Wi-Fi, and that can impact people. So when you combine it all and you get people to throw out all the artificial synthetic nonsense, the extra tech they don't need, the extra Wi-Fi that is not helping them or is hurting them, when you get them on natural lighting, when you get them to use phototherapy devices, and when you get them eating the diet that's right for them, they just blossom. I mean, their problems really respond well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned about properly breath. So especially these times with face masks mandatory. So it's,
right, yeah, that's a really interesting topic. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's we are making some articles. We are writing some articles about that. So
yeah,
until published one some days ago. So it's a really hot topics nowadays. So, yeah. And so we are really glad people like to see people like you who understood that, for example, diet is really important, but just one part of the equation. So when we started years ago, we used to think that the diet can fix everything, but now we became aware that it's a far cry from that, because you can eat well, but if you don't manage, as you mentioned the light and other things, it's going to be really hard.
Circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms.
So, how long? How did you get aware about that? So about the number of variables involved, and if you can explain in more details what you think are the pillars of health.
Sure. So that's a big topic, right? because it all matters. Everything that we're exposed to matters. My undergraduate college thesis was on the health effects of factory farming, and I tried to look at it as all the different problems, right? And factory farming, for people who are not aware or familiar with it, I don't know what farming is like. I don't know how much of this you have in Italy, but in the United States, we have these vast farms where you may have hundreds of thousands, or for all I know, millions of animals in a very small area. And what's crazy about this is we have created a food system where, for example, 12.5% or even 25% of the pigs in the United States that are going to be, butchered and sold for meat will be raised in one or two different states. And so you have millions and millions and millions of animals that are producing all this waste. And so you have issues with air pollution, you have issues with water pollution, you have issues with smells. And because the air pollution is not just particulate matter or volatile organic compounds, it's also dust and odors. And then you have issues with noise pollution. And, so pollution that people are aware of in terms of environmental health and functional medicine is such a vast array of different things. And it becomes very complicated in terms of our modern lifestyles, because we've made things so complicated for convenience without thinking through all the health problems. And then beyond, air, water, pollution, there's the light we're living under, there's the electrical and magnetic fields that we're being exposed to, which of course we talk all about all the time on, the people who are interested in mitochondrial health with interest in, grounding and earthing, connecting to the earth and avoiding, significant electromagnetic radiation made by humanity. And then obviously there's diet, right? And then the thing that I become more and more interested in over particularly last year, is really how mindset and psychology affect health, because I've, as I've gotten my own environment dialed in, I found that there's things that I needed to change about my mindset and the way I was thinking. And I've noticed this for my patients as well. People who don't get well often are the people who have the most negative attitude about it. And it's not that, their negative attitude is even necessarily changing their physical being. It's that they're closing all the doors that lead to all the good outcomes, and they just have a negative attitude about new opportunities. And so that in a nutshell is health. It's controlling all of the environmental inputs to begin with so that all of them are healthy. And probably the most simple and enduring quote that really shapes the way I look at natural health when it comes to just the basic stuff, right? Because therapeutic interventions are a little bit different, because you may, they get more complicated. But Jonathan Wright, who's a pioneer of natural medicine here in the United States, said, copy nature. And he said that in the context of bioidentical hormone replacement, but he's right across the board. And the big mistakes that I see people making in their health are when they break natural rhythms, break natural cycles, when they introduce non-natural things into their life and don't pay attention to the changes that take place. And the big problem is that a lot of the time the changes don't take place for days or months or weeks or years. And so you have no idea that because you change this thing about your diet, or because you change this thing about your lighting or whatever, that all of a sudden 6 months later, you're sick, right? And so getting back to those basics and really getting people to do the right thing with their environment is the foundation of what I do in a very comprehensive and very in-depth way.
So, in fact, we 100% agree with your perspective. Indeed, we created a brand new job, which is called the Light Trainer. But it's not just about light. It's about the overall magnetic radiation, of course.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But also on every aspect of the connecting with nature. So hurting. But in our modern world, our first aim is to copy nature, as you told. But we introduced some biohacking devices to be used when you can't physically connect directly with nature. So what do you think about biohacking items, and in your opinion, what are the most important for our health, and especially as you can see with your patients?
Yeah, so the number one thing would be actually quantifying what's going on. So, for example, one of the things I've seen people do is they buy grounding gear, right? And they think, oh, I just have to plug this into the ground of the electrical outlet in my house. No, it's not that simple, because what can happen, right, is there's wiring errors. There are big electrical and magnetic fields. And so probably the most frustrating thing, I think, to most people when they get into this world of light is that they don't understand how dependent on variables that they can't see, taste, touch, or smell things are. And so, you think to yourself, oh, this tomato, it's good for me. I'll eat it and it'll be good for me, right? Oh, this grounding mat or this grounding bracelet or this grounding blanket or whatever, it's good for me. This will work, right? No, because if there's a wiring error in the house and there's a big electrical or magnetic field that's coming through that, it can actually make you sick. And people don't want to deal with the fact that sometimes, frankly, with my patients now, I just said, look, if you want to get into this, buy your own meters. Just buy them. They may be hundreds of dollars, but they're not going to disappear on you. They're not going to grow legs and walk off. They're going to be, you can change the batteries out and you can keep using them. And the reality is that, there's a lot of use to having your house inspected by a electromagnetic, whatever specialist you want to call it. And I still encourage people to do that, particularly if they've got the money, because that expertise is valuable. But there's so much people can do with just basic equipment, a couple $100 for a Gauss meter, electrical, magnetic field measurement tool, a couple $100 for a radio frequency measurement tool, nothing, crazy. They don't need to be able to figure out the exact levels or where it's coming from or what frequency it's on. But just something to give them an idea of if they're in a really electromagnetically polluted environment, because what people don't realize is that if they're grounding in such an environment, then they can actually make themselves worse. And that's the biggest misconception I think people have. And I think a lot of them get hung up on the fact that it's going to cost money to buy the meters and they want to just wing it without the data. And that's just time and again, to me, been demonstrated to be a mistake.
I think you perfectly hit the nail. Indeed, we are teaching people, we are making courses about becoming a light trainer, which means going into the houses and measure electromagnetic pollution and light pollution. For example, LED and artificial lights. So our students can learn how to fix light. So, for example, using sunlight LED technology, red light in the evening, and then fix some electromagnetic pollution. So it's we think it's a really valuable procedure. So we're really glad that you confirmed what we are doing. Angelo,
right. No, but we first goal is to make formation, to make people understand that electromagnetic pollution is really dangerous. Not only Wi-Fi, but also our electrical plan in our house.
Right.
It maybe is more dangerous than Wi-Fi. So this is our goal. We make every month a course about these things in every part of Italy. So next the 19th of September, we will be in Salerno, next to Naples, in Italy.
Yeah.
Then in October 18, we will be in La Spezia, next to Genova, in the north of Italy, and so on. Every month we make a course, even in this COVID area. We don't. We don't have fear of the COVID. We go everywhere.
Yeah.
Without masks.
Yeah. Yep.
And with hugs and kiss.
Yeah.
with a lot of kisses.
And the biggest thing that I explain to my patients about the importance of this is that they may go without, if they don't measure, I never know how much of their problem is due to a electromagnetic issue. And the classic example is somebody who doesn't realize that, say, there's a massive electrical or magnetic field where they're sleeping, and they try all these supplements and they get on drugs and sedatives and they just try all these different things. But the problem is the electrical or magnetic field where they're sleeping.
Yes.
And likewise, the other problem is that whenever we look at the epidemiological literature on this, we see that there are small but significant increases in diseases, whether it's, brain cancer or cardiovascular disease or, childhood leukemia, right? And there's small risks, right? But there's lots of diseases associated with these problems. And so I have no idea if somebody ignoring this piece of their environment is setting them up for a cancer 10, 20, 30 years down the line. And for all I know, they're never going to get that cancer and they're going to die at an advanced age in their bed very comfortably. But, it's all about how much risk you want to take and how much effort you're willing to put forth in order to minimize that risk. Obviously for me, it's partly it's because I know too much, right? But the other piece of it is that I've read this literature, and it's actually pretty simple to change your environment in a way that really reduces your exposure. And when you experience how much better you feel when you're minimizing this exposure and you're optimizing all these different variables, then it's just a no-brainer.
The first thing we do when we we go in houses is to go in the bedroom, because people normally spend 8-9 hours daily in the bedroom. So we will check first the bedroom. And another activity that we do is to go in offices, offices, because we are convinced that we can rise the dopamine level in people and make them more creative and lessen their illness at job. So I think that the future is this kind of job. The medicine of the future is to control the light and the electromagnetic field around us.
Right. I agree. And people don't realize that it's not, like I'm looking at my meter right now, and even though I have a bunch of, devices on right now and I'm charging my computer, the fields that I'm exposed to are small. In fact, they're practically negligible.
I am with my hands on, I am doing earthing. So I am at zero.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you hit the nail telling that it's really important to get some kind of measurement. Yeah, because so you can decide whether to use one kind of biohacking items or something else. So, for example, we just the anecdotal evidence we had lately. So we went to visit an office, and we told that there was a high Wi-Fi or a radio frequency radiation, but instead that was good, but we found a huge level of dirty electricity.
Yep.
And indeed, we've been confirmed that he had some kind of issues with the housing, with the cables, and so it's really important to know what or where we are talking about to fix the problem.
When I checked the electricity in my house, I was getting a radio station coming through, and I would plug the dirty electricity meter in, and it would just pipe this radio station. I have no idea what station it was, but it would come right out of the outlet.
Wherever we go, we find a surprise.
Yep. And that's the thing, is that's why people, they want it to be simple. They want to just, I just want to buy the low EMF, whatever. I'm like, no, listen, buy the meter, because you can unplug stuff and figure out what's causing the problem. And then you can buy whatever kind of gadgetry you want.
Paradoxically, I found more problem in country, in villa, in some villa.
Yeah. Well, there's so many factors, right, that we have to stay on top of. Like, one of the reasons that I'm renting the house that I'm in right now is that it has aluminum siding. And so, I can pick up a fair amount of EMF outside of my house. But look, I mean, there's like nothing coming through the walls. And if I wanted to really make it tight, right, I could buy window shielding. And if I really wanted to make it tight, I could do something in the attic, like put in some foil insulation. But, I don't need to. The levels are low. And it's amazing to me, having tested many different houses, many different places in the United States, how different the levels are and how surprising it is. I used to think that I could tell you what the levels were going to be in a neighborhood just based on how big the houses were and how close they were together and all this other stuff. But what I found is that you're constantly being surprised by what you didn't realize. And the other thing that people need to understand is that it changes over the course of the day. So when everyone's at work, residential areas are less polluted because there's less power consumption and less wireless communication going on. And then in the evening, those areas are worse. And likewise, if you measure your workplace at night, you're getting a completely different reading than you would during the day, which again is why buying some basic equipment is so valuable for the average person.
Here we have a couple of questions. Daniele says, the EMF is like smoke. We can see immediately issue on our health. We can see EMF, and we don't understand how much it interferes with our body. We can agree with him, I think. And Matteo is saying to ask you about 5G.
Oh man,
5G there, and how can you deal with that?
Yeah, the problem with 5, I don't have a whole lot to say about 5G. I mean, I do have a lot to say about 5G. It's bad from everything that I've read and everything that I've heard. And the people who are skeptical of that, just point out to them that it's like there's data on the military researching how to use this as a weapon, right? So, yeah, I think that the main thing is what am I supposed to do? I'm not going to go live under a rock. I've experimented, let's just say, with really limiting my exposure to EMF, but then there's a counterbalance there because you end up very socially isolated. So that's very detrimental, especially if you have big goals and big dreams. So how much is it affecting me? Well, I get my labs done and I know that my labs look good. And I know that they vary a lot more with other factors in the environment than with what zip code I'm in, which may surprise people, but it's what I've found. And so 5G is bad. We should definitely there needs to be a discussion about how much electromagnetic radiation we're going to allow in our shared environment, because people streaming YouTube is not a good reason to expose the public to a threat. It's been very interesting to watch this issue evolve with the current, let's just call it excitement, because as I think you both remember, or both probably are aware, there's been a lot of censorship surrounding the connections. And the only thing I'll say to that is really that, electromagnetic radiation affects our biology, it affects our immune systems, and it's very coincidental that certain changes in our electromagnetic environment have occurred this year, given other events.
Listen, may I make a question?
Yeah.
What do you think about vitamin D supplementation that is so fashionable among functional?
I like that you call it
like you,
yeah,
because I think that this is the health disaster for the future in Italy. We have a lot of medical doctors that are prescribing supplementation of vitamin D at a really horse level for elephants. Dosage of elephant at health people.
Yep.
And so ill people, sick people.
And I see this fairly regularly. I've actually, a lot of people want to tell you there's no side effects. Nobody ever gets admitted for high vitamin D levels. And it's true that it's uncommon, but I have seen it. And there's way more uncommon things that I haven't seen than that. So I think the most important thing for people to understand about vitamin D is that it is a very powerful steroid hormone. And so it turns on and off genes, and it has what we call pleiotropic, or many different and varied effects around the body. And the problem is that, it's a little bit like you're throwing this very powerful stimulus into this very complicated system, the human body. So are you confident that you're going to get a positive or beneficial outcome to that? And you have to ask yourself too, how is vitamin D handled in the body? If it's produced in the skin or absorbed from the gut, it's then stored in the liver and released on demand, and then it's converted in the tissues into other forms, and it's converted in different organs into yet more forms. And so there's the two main forms of the storage forms, and then the active form. And so when most people are measuring vitamin D levels, they're just measuring the storage form. Well, that's like asking, how many pallets of ammunition are in the ammo depot. If the ammo depot is low, it doesn't mean that the guys on the front line are not shooting every single gun that they have, right? And it also doesn't mean that you're going to get a benefit if you actually boost their vitamin D, because their vitamin D may be part of, let's say, an autoimmune process. So if you boost, and then when I say autoimmune, I really shouldn't say autoimmune. I should say inflammatory process. So you can actually make people worse when you give them supplemental vitamin D, because you're basically stepping on the gas pedal of certain types of pathology. Now, that being said, vitamin D is necessary for people to have a healthy immune system, to recover from autoimmune diseases, to recover from allergies, to recover from, and cancers as well. But when it's low, I think, the overwhelming thing that people the thing that people should ask first is, why is it low? Is it being converted into the active form? If it's being converted into the active form, well, is the answer really just to give more of it? Because I've seen people do that, and I've seen them not get better. And that's something that I found out this year, is really just how connected vitamin D is to all these other pieces of the puzzle, right? If you don't have the right mineral balance, it doesn't matter what your vitamin D level is, because if those minerals are not around, they cannot run the enzyme systems that are going to be activated by vitamin D. And if you don't have and it doesn't matter, we can go through every single major mineral in the body, right? Selenium, magnesium, manganese, molybdenum, zinc, copper, right? They all have tie-ins to vitamin D. And then vitamin A is also a steroid hormone, and it will also turn on and off genes in the nucleus. And what people don't realize is all the diseases that are associated with vitamin D deficiency are also associated with vitamin A deficiency. And one of the reasons for this is that vitamin D and vitamin A almost always co-occur in nature. And they often co-occur in a fairly specific ratio, where the vitamin A vastly outnumbers the vitamin D. And I became aware of this through somebody else in the health info space, Morley Robbins. And I should also mention Jim Stevenson, because they both do a lot of time talking about this. And so you just can't, the idea of supplementing something is treating treating your body as simply as you treat your car, right? If your gas tank is low, but you just went to the gas station, is the answer to fill up your gas tank? No, it's to look for a leak, or it's to try and figure out why your car is burning more gas than it should. And so people need to, and you're right, people are really just like jumping the gun on testing vitamin D and just supplementing it, and they got to know what level they're shooting for, because people get super high and don't get any therapeutic benefit. And then there's the people you meet who say, yeah, I got worse with vitamin D. And for them, a lot of them are deficient in minerals. I'm thinking of a specific patient right now who told me that she got worse after she started vitamin D supplementation, and she ended up having a very low magnesium level.
Only one question, quick question. Then yeah. I will leave you to Alessio. And in your career, you are young, so I'm old, unfortunately. And in your career, what are the collateral effects that you have seen about the supplementation of vitamin D with the high dosage of vitamin D after years or months of supplementation? Have you seen something very bad?
I can't. Well, here's the thing, right? Is that all these people who are taking high levels of vitamin D, it's because they don't feel well, and they don't feel well, and then they have some kind of objective disease, right? No matter what that is, Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, whatever it is, right? They're taking the vitamin D because they think they need it. The bottom line is that if you're supplementing with vitamin D without considering your other micronutrients, it's like worrying about whether or not you've got enough windshield wiper fluid in your car. I use a lot of car analogies because I'm an American and I know I love cars. So it's like worrying about the amount of windshield wiper fluid in your car. There's all these other things that matter. And so when you're just focusing on the vitamin D without thinking about all the other factors that it influences, you're just totally missing the rest of that picture. And that's why I think, and again, you want to be circumspect too about how you approach your testing, because just because something's low doesn't mean you need to give them more of it. It may be low because they've got some kind of pathological process going on, and that pathological process may be related to something else in their environment that has nothing to do with what's going in their mouth, right? And so, again, I can't speak to. I will say that I've seen people hospitalized for elevated levels of calcium with vitamin D. That does happen. And so that's why I monitor it in my patients and I don't let them when I look at, I can't think of somebody who I had to use exogenous vitamin D and to get their vitamin D level up, at least recently, because between lamps and the sun and fish oil or cod liver oil, there's so many different ways to supplement with vitamin D that's more natural than taking a vitamin D pill.
I'm asking all this question because I'm writing a book about this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I will. I hope to end this book in next 2 months.
Great.
Only about why don't supplementing vitamin D.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and I can't tell you how many people have come to me who were on huge amounts of vitamin D for long periods of time and they didn't get better, right? So if the problem is if it's not the bright vitamin D was not the problem for them, it was something else. That's why you've got to expand your testing, and you've got to look at the rest of the environment, which very few functional medicine doctors know how to actually do.
Yes, I agree. Totally agree.
And that's why, things that you guys are doing like this light training, it takes time to figure out how to fix somebody's light environment. There are lots of ins and outs, and take a lot of time.
That's why we go around Italy to make this
great.
Because we want to people that understand what we say, because it is really difficult to make people understand this issue, because people needs a pill. They want a pill, the magic pill.
Yep.
Okay.
And also, we'd like to point out that many people are being misled by the fact that you are saying you have to avoid the sun. You can take the vitamin D pill, but totally overlooking the fact that the sun is just it's far beyond the vitamin D. So aside from nitric oxide and other compounds, you have a hubris of the metabolites that produce in your skin that you can't produce in other ways with pills and otherwise. So it's totally misleading, and you are deceiving people to understand the real overall picture.
Exactly. There's an enormous amount
of ophthalmologists. Every time I go there, he says, "Okay, do you wear sunglasses at sun?" Okay. I tell yes, I wear.
You let him think that
I wear.
I
don't have any sunglasses at home.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I've thought about this a lot because I have been in situations where there's so much light coming at me, like up in the mountains at like 15,000 feet, where there's tons of, and the Eskimo did actually wear these walrus tusk glasses that would limit the amount of light coming into their eyes. That's the same reason why football players or baseball players or other outdoor, athletes will put black lines under their eyes. It cuts the glare So we can do these things to change the light that's coming into our eyes, but filtering it is just it's a giant biology experiment, and it's not going well. It's really not going well. And it's so strange. It's so amazing to me to see how resistant people are to it. They're like, well, I don't want to give up my sunglasses. It's like, hey, look, no one has ever demonstrated that people who wear sunglasses on a regular basis have less disease. And in fact, one of the things I've noticed is that so many of my patients who are really messed up, like really sick, they have extreme intense photophobia. They never let the sun hit their eye. They're always indoors. They can't stand the heat outside. They can't stand the cold outside. And you know what? They're trying to do it all with supplements. They're trying to do it all with herbs or with diet or whatever. And it doesn't work. And that's just what I like to call it the redneck paradox. Do Italians know what rednecks are?
No. Yeah.
So it's like, like somebody who's not very educated and it's a stereotype, to be clear. I love rednecks for the record, and I've spent a lot of my career taking care of them. So, but they're called rednecks because they get sunburned on their neck because they work outside. That's where it comes from. And I find it really ironic. There's all these people out there who are like spending all this time and all this money trying to be healthy, right? And they can't figure out what's wrong with them. Well, what's wrong with them is that they're living indoors under fake light, surrounded by Wi-Fi and EMF and electrical and magnetic fields. And yet you have these rednecks out there who eat the worst food and don't pay any attention to their health and may smoke and drink, and they're hardier and more fit than these people who are trying so hard to be healthy. That's the differentiator of the sun, of being outside. And it's not, just a kooky, not just a funny observation from me. You see this in the literature. Melanoma is less or as common in people who work outside than it is in other people. So, it's like I tell people, if the sun causes melanoma, then spoons make people fat. It's just more complicated than that. It's not as simple as avoid the sun and you won't get skin cancer, because, the things you eat determine what's in your skin, and what's in your skin will be affected by these frequencies of light. That's why eating colorful vegetables reduces your risk of cancer. That's why, eating cold water fish with the vitamin D in it helps reduce, your risk of many diseases. And not to mention your mineral balance, because what people don't realize is that the mechanism by which sunlight causes free radical damage is iron dependent. And so if you have iron in the wrong place, it can create all these problems.
Yeah, that's a great explanation.
Yeah, thanks.
We have a quick question again from Matteo, and then we can move
Sure.
to the other argument.
Remember, we are at 42 minutes of the live. So
let's answer.
quick question and quick answer.
He's
Please.
saying, do you think we could find specific frequencies that do not affect our health?
Ooh, yeah. So what you're really asking me is there going to be therapeutic or non-harmful benefit, shall we say, with any frequencies below infrared light, right? And I think the jury's out on that. I don't know how we're even going to test it, because if it takes 10 years to find the effect, how are we going to figure that out? I don't know. But I think that, and then you get into all these like pulsed EMF devices, which I'm very skeptical of, because these pulsed EMF devices are all running on radio frequency radiation. And it's sort of an awkward conversation when I meet people who are using them, because they seem to have no idea how radio frequency radiation actually works. Now, the caveat to that, right, is that there are people out there saying, this or that or whatever electromagnetic frequency changed my life and helped me get over my fatigue, insomnia, headaches, whatever, right? So I guess, to make a long story short, I think there's potentially great benefit to these things, but the devil is in the details of how we harness them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So let's move toward the other focus point. And so we are told every day from the mainstream media and doctors that it's all about genetics. So they look at our genome, and they say, no, you have this mutation, we have that. But we learned that mitochondrial health is the key for having good or bad outcomes. So mitochondria is getting a really hot argument.
Right.
So what do you think about it, and how we can improve mitochondrial health?
So I think that, the whole genes over the environment hypothesis, the idea that our genetics determine our fate, is dying a slow, painful, agonizing death in the public consciousness. And I wish it would hurry up and die, because it's a lie. And the simple reality is that people, their health is truly determined by their environment and by their actions and their choices. And, it's funny, every patient that I see, I take to a certain extent a family history. And there are certain patterns, like certain families are certainly more disposed to certain diseases, but overwhelmingly what really makes or breaks somebody's health is how they choose to live and what environment they're living in. And so this is where the mitochondria really, I think, enters the picture in the conversation, because what people need to realize about their internal work, their internal organs and the interiors of their cells, is that what they're trying to do, think about it. You're a cell inside some organ of your body, right? The name of the game is produce enough energy to not die and keep up with the demands of life. And if toxins show up, be able to detoxify them. And if infections show up, be able to resist them. And if, you run out of nutrients, be able to compensate for a long enough period of time until the nutrients come back, right? In order to do that, what all of our cells and all of even the organelles and like our mitochondria within our cells are trying to do is read what's in our blood, what's, the light we're under, the nutrients that we're being exposed to or through the blood or whatever. They're trying to react to and respond to the environment in order to improve performance and longevity. And that's what's so cool about the mitochondria. They're really responding to the environment through a whole host of other different factors. When people talk about hormones, well, what triggers hormone release? Hormone release is really about environmental inputs, whether it's your boss yelling at you and threatening to fire you and creating a stress response and causing you to have a lot of cortisol released, or if it's you're running a marathon and your cortisol is going up because you're under physical stress, or if it's because, you're in a dark room and your melatonin is rising because you're not being exposed to any light. All of these things are based in the environment. And hormones are really how the central nervous system and the endocrine system of the body, more generally, signal to all the different cells what they're supposed to do based on what's happening in the environment. And as we've learned more and more about how all of this works, it really, the simple fact is that as the environment, depending on what happens in the environment, you'll get changes in the health of the body. And what that really means is changes in the health of their mitochondria and how those mitochondria are working to produce energy. And so if you're in a sick and toxic environment and you're not properly nourishing your body, your mitochondria fall apart very quickly, and this manifests as disease. And the more we learn about the genetics of the mitochondria, the less it makes sense to blame everything on the nuclear genome in the center of the cell, because and these are classic studies by guys like Thomas Seyfried and his colleagues who've been researching metabolic roots of cancer, right? You hear about experiments where they took a cancerous nucleus and they put it into a cell with healthy mitochondria, and the cancerous nucleus got better, right? So there's this fascinating crosstalk between the mitochondria and the nucleus that's actually what's determining cellular health based on, of course, what's going on in the environment.
Yeah, that's a really hot topic.
Yeah.
Also, mitochondrial dynamics, so fusion, fission, so they're really important. The homeostasis of these parameters. So you developed a program which is called Polar Bear Fitness Program. So if you can explain what it's about and the overall content.
Yeah, so it's interesting that I'm doing this interview with you now. I'm actually winding the program down in 7 days. I'm going to take it offline because I'm launching new content this year. But basically, I created a program where I used polar bears as really a teaching example, because what people don't realize about their light environment is really they can learn all of it from a polar bear, and it's really amazing when you start to learn really study how animals learn, how other animals live. Polar bears live in the most extreme light environment on planet Earth, right? Where there's constant light in the summer and then zero light in the winter. And what people don't realize is that the hibernation of bears and the migrations of animals, across continents is based on light signals and temperature and other things that have nothing to do with their food. And the more extreme the latitude, the more extreme the adaptations to these changes in the light cycle. And so the diets of the animals in these places will change radically, right? And they'll fast for long, long periods of time. Pregnant female polar bears fast for longer than any other species on planet Earth. It's something like 8 or 9 months. And while they're doing that, they're making babies, which is an incredibly resource intensive process. And that's why polar bears will lose, I think it's something like, they lose something like 50% of their body weight every year, and then they gain it back in the summer. And I made the course because I found all these people who were totally confused about why they could eat so healthily and so wholesomely and yet still be so sick. And my experience was simply that people who were not paying attention to their light environment did not have the appropriate, it didn't matter what they ate. And if you didn't fix the light environment, then what people were going to be eating was not actually going to be fixing their underlying medical problems. That's not to say that diet doesn't matter, because it definitely does. And it's a huge part of what I focus on with people, because there's so much to get right there, and there's so much that you can get wrong. But the course was basically just to help people understand the basics of how light determines your circadian rhythms and can alter your metabolism.
Yeah, that's really an interesting point. Do you think that, we suppose that there can be some mitochondrial adaptation to different latitudes? So someone is supposed to have a certain diet at the equator, and some others they have to match the mitochondrial functioning with cold climate, to cope with cold climates. What do you think about that?
Right. So people, on a very basic physiological level, the energy, going back to what I said about how the body is trying to anticipate what's going to happen next in order to maximize survival, right? When the body is exposed to different temperatures or different types of light, it will alter what's being burned and how. So and the best example of this that I can think of is how we burn fat and sugar for heat. We burn energy in brown fat, which are depositions of fat over our scapula and spine and over our hips. And when we're exposed to cold, these areas of fat are filled with mitochondria, and they start to burn energy and they start to generate heat. And they tend to burn fat. And when you talk to people who've lived in very cold places, they'll tell you that they crave fat. And I've lived in Florida, which is the furthest south state on the eastern seaboard, and I've lived in Maine, which is the furthest north state on the eastern seaboard. And I spent a lot of time in Minnesota too. So I've spent a lot of time in really cold places. The coldest I've ever been is the coldest place I've ever been was Minnesota in negative 35 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is negative, somewhere well in the negatives of Celsius. And you'll crave fat because your body needs it in order to generate that heat that you're being triggered to generate. And it also has to do with, your metabolic rate when you're sleeping versus when you're awake. And, when you think about it, all of the colorful fruits and vegetables that we're told to eat a lot of grow best in the summer, right? When there's a very high intensity light that is going to, and those colors are really going to help us as antioxidants, right? And the vitamin C in the fruits and the vegetables and all that stuff. Well, it's no coincidence that the UV light in summer is strongest. And so it's got the most potential to cause oxidative damage in our skin. So the more you look at what grows where, what concentrations of nutrients are in the plant, animal, whatever, that's what you need in that specific location. Where people run into problems is where they don't pay attention to like small details. Let me give you an example. There's a lot of sauerkraut in being sold, at least in the United States, that's actually just cabbage that's been sliced and then soaked in vinegar. This is not technically sauerkraut. It's not fermented. And the reason this matters is that fermented sauerkraut has vitamin C. And it's one of the only sources of vitamin C that you have in a very cold climate through the winter. And if you were to say, think to yourself, okay, I'm going to eat a local seasonal diet. That means I'm not going to eat any fruit all winter. You might actually drop your vitamin C levels. And I actually do diagnose low vitamin C levels more often than I would like. And before you get really low levels of vitamin C, you actually just end up with changes in like the metabolism of your neurotransmitters and things like that. And so the bottom line is, people need to really pay close attention to what they're doing, particularly at high extreme latitudes, because they can get into a lot of trouble with eating the wrong thing and not getting the right nutrition for their season.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating area, because when we lived in according to nature, there was an ancestral wisdom about that. So now we totally lost everything. So
yeah. And we've been told that these people are superstitious and backwards, and there's nothing wrong with our modern ways of life, which I find ironic because we have all these modern problems that are only getting worse, while people, and I tell people, look, the healthiest people in the world are actually the poorest, because they like go out every day and they like kill what they eat, or they grow what they eat, or they have to harvest it and they have to get their hands dirty doing it, right? And the sickest people that I meet are the people who are the most indoors and the least, naturally living.
In Italy, we have a functional medical doctor that also make this method, because they are big like bears, all around long, 365 days a year. They are big like bear, fat like a bear. Also on winter.
You mean that they're really overweight?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of that too. There's a lot of really powerful, and I'm not going to name any of them, but I mean really powerful influencers who don't look good.
Yeah, exactly. If you are not, if you first, if you don't witness what you speak about, you're losing credibility. So
if you can't keep yourself in shape, why should anybody listen to you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, what are your future perspective? What are you working on now?
My next big thing is going to be a series of videos on hidden causes of disease. And I decided to make this because I kept running into the same sort of bad actors in my patients' lives they weren't aware of causing their problems. And I decided I was just going to start, and I'm going to go through probably about 8 or 10 different complaints that sum up probably 90% of what people come to see me for, and just explain to them how there's lots of things that are hidden in their environment that they really need to dial in or figure out as a potential cause of their illness. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. And there's going to be a lot more videos coming out on my social media channels. And people really want to know what I think, though they should sign up for my my newsletter, because as I think people who are watching understand, there's a lot of people out there who are censoring, what we're saying. And so I can't be totally candid on my social media.
Yeah, we really advise to join your newsletter, because it's really, really interesting.
Can you remember your site, your website?
Yes, it's
.com. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, you can subscribe there.
Okay.
Yeah, we really suggest it. Yeah, because it's really you have a really important things.
Thanks.
We are looking forward for the videos, and now I'm asking Angelo if maybe the next year we can invite you here for a lecture, maybe.
That would be really fun. I'm game. I hear you have a lot of really good food and wine in Italy, and I'm interested in both of those things.
Yeah, we have a really good wine yet.
Good. Good.
Don't speak about wine. Don't speak about wine because I had to stop to drink wine because an histamine problem. So I am. It's like something is dead for me.
Okay.
Because I'm dependent of wine.
We won't drink any wine around you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's gone away. So.
È morto qualcuno qua. È caduta la linea.
Ok, sei tornato. Ok, yeah. You're back. Angelo? Angelo? Are you there?
Eccomi, sono rientrato.
Ok.
I'm back, sorry.
It's all right.
I live next to the seaside, and there is few electromagnetici.
You don't have good connections. Yeah, I get it.
Puoi chiedere qualcosa ancora, Angelo, tu?
No. There was another question of Alessio about what do you use blue blocking glasses, photobiomodulation in your life, in your routine? What is your daily routine? Because people like to know our daily routine.
Yeah, so my daily routine is I wake up. I guess I'll explain a little bit more about really like what my situation is right now. I live in in America we call it a suburb. I don't know what you call it in Italy, but I live in a house among other houses. I'm not living out in the middle of nowhere, and for better or for worse, I have some street lights that actually can come in through into my bedroom, and so I have blackout curtains up, but I don't have them up to cover all the light, and so I still get enough dawn light through my bedroom window that it wakes me up in the morning. So I wake up to natural light, and I sleep but the room is still extremely dark, too dark to really navigate in overnight.
So outside you don't have any light pollution.
I would if I didn't have the right curtains up, but I have really heavy black curtains that just stop all the street light. And then the one window where that's not totally covered, there really isn't any street light that comes through that. So I just get some dawn light. And I get up at about 6:37, which right now is about 30 minutes after first light and like 10 or 20 minutes before dawn. There's no artificial light in my life really until I'm at work, aside from basically just like checking messages on my phone. I get up, I make some coffee, I cook a nice breakfast, I sit out on my porch. I'm in natural light the whole time, obviously, and then I'll come inside and I make it to work. I also work at a clinic across town. I'll go down there and work. And then where I'm working, I have natural light in my office. Here, I have natural light in my office. You can't see it. The lights that I have on my computer for podcasts are really only on when I'm doing something like this, and they're USB powered, so there's no flicker, and they're low color temperature, so they're nice and warm. They're not being bombarded by blue light. I have Iris, which is a blue light blocking software on my laptop. I have the night filter on my phone. After dark, when I'm around artificial light, I'm wearing the dark red tinted blue blockers. I have 2 pairs from Raw Optics. And when I'm doing stuff at night, I'm either using incandescent bulbs, which have obviously a low color temperature rating. And then I'm often wearing my blue blockers when I have those on. And when I get up in the middle of the night, I actually navigate around the house. Like if I have to go to the bathroom or something, with a red LED headlamp. And, I gravitated towards the most important things are the blue blockers after dark and the minimizing the artificial light after dark, particularly the blues and the greens, and then using the red headlamp if you're getting up, because otherwise I just found that, my sleep just wasn't the same. And with that, I mean, my sleep went from being terrible after years of being on call and, having to go into the hospital at odd hours. It went from being terrible and waking up 2 or 3 times a night to being great and sleeping through the night and feeling rested the next morning.
And last question, very quickly. Do you use some supplement, and what is your training if you train?
Yeah. So my supplements are tailored to my latest lab results and are somewhat dynamic. So let me give you an example. If I use my UVB lamp for my vitamin D 3 times a week, I don't need to worry about how much vitamin D I eat. This week, I worked a lot. And so what did I do? I focused on seafood. I bought some nice smoked salmon today. I had scallops for lunch. I actually don't know how much vitamin D is in scallops. I hope there's some. But I think you get the idea. When I'm not in the sun and strong ultraviolet light, I'm eating high vitamin D foods. And then I'm obviously using my UVB lamp whenever I get the chance. And then for photobiomodulation, because you mentioned that, I didn't answer. I actually haven't integrated it into my routine yet, the way I would like to, but I have my panel set up in the other room, and there's definitely a 30-minute window of photobiomodulation is definitely going to make it into my routine soon. Part of that is because right now it's our summer, and so I just want to be outside and use nature's photobiomodulation. But when it gets to be cold and dark here, I am sure that I'm going to be using my big light panels and boxes all the time. And then for physical training, I've been focusing more on weights and resistance training recently. And it's mostly like 20 to 30 minute workouts that are pretty simple, nothing fancy. And I'm going to be taking Erwin LaCour's MoveNat certification level 1 in mid-October, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, it's a really interesting training program.
Yeah.
Okay, I am everything white because I make triathlon, so yes. I am destroyed.
Yeah,
I have exaggerated in my past.
Yeah. Well, I hope you had fun doing it.
Yes, of course. I don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will continue. Okay, thank you so much, Leland.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, see you soon. See you soon in Italy for a lecture.
Yeah, let me know.
We hope to organize big events, international events, like the one of 2 years ago. We had 5 important international guests, like I don't know if you know Laszlo Boros in Italy.
Yeah.
Laszlo Boros. Yeah, Doris Lowe.
Yeah.
And Csaba from Hungary.
I don't know.
He's an oncologist specialized in paleo diet, ketogenic paleo diet, and others important international guests, Italians included.
Got it. Cool.
2 days of Congress.
Great.
So the next year, we'll.
We try.
Yeah, let me know because I got to put it on my schedule.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Of course.
All right,
Thank you so much. So, see you soon.
And we hope to hear from you soon.
To be sure. Yeah.
Ciao.
All right.
Bye. Bye.